Republican Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn announced a series of subpoenas, most notably one on the estate of deceased wealthy financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, including the flight logs from his private plane. Let's watch.
And since we're in the business of issuing subpoenas now, here are a few more that I've filed. A subpoena to Jeffrey Epstein's estate to provide the flight logs for his private plane, given the numerous allegations of human trafficking and sexual abuse surrounding Mr. Epstein. I think it is very important that we identify everybody that was on that plane and how many trips they took on that plane and the destinations to which they arrived.
Epstein died in 2019 while awaiting trial for charges of sex trafficking of underage girls. Though deceased, interest in his multiple private jets has remained constant, including on the Lolita Express, which allegedly flew prominent people and minor girls around the world, public figures including Bill Gates, Prince Andrew, and Donald Trump, among many, many others. I think this is why many people were paying attention to Ghislaine Maxwell's trial while the media wasn't. She had a huge trial in New York. She was sentenced to 20 years. She was found guilty of everything we knew Jeffrey Epstein was up to. And I think what we thought would come out of that would be some public reckoning with the flight logs, which we never got. And I think we know that there are far more accomplices to what Jeffrey Epstein was up to than Ghislaine Maxwell. So I'm quite excited that, Blackburn is issuing a subpoena here because I think the American public wants to know and deserves to know.
Yeah, exactly. And I would also mention Bill Clinton as one of the individuals who repeatedly was taking flights on the Lolita Express. And I believe the Clintons had actually been to Epstein Island a couple of times as well. And I think one of the dots that's not really been explicitly connected in the Jeffrey Epstein case, outside of independent journalists who have been looking into his financials, is the idea that Jeffrey Epstein was able to get these very high-profile clients, perhaps through blackmail. Perhaps he would have them involved in this underage sex trafficking ring, and then he would blackmail them into investing their money with his firm and allowing him to manage their finances. And that might have very well been why he got wealthy. And to your point about Ghislaine Maxwell, 100% her little black book, her list of clients should have come out during that trial. And the fact that the judge ruled in that case that it was immaterial or not relevant to the trial is fairly ridiculous. There's no crime without the clients. I mean, there's no sex trafficking ring. There's no Ghislaine Maxwell providing victims unless there's a demand for the services. So we absolutely should know who those individuals are. And it seems quite obvious that there are people that they're trying to protect throughout this process. And it's why there was so much skepticism over the idea that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. And I would also say that this subpoena comes in tandem with a new report that says a brothel that was based out of Massachusetts and Virginia was frequented by some pretty highly powerful individuals, according to a statement from a law enforcement individual who was involved in this. The case goes back to the summer of 2022 when investigators identified buyers through surveillance phone records and interviews. They are doctors, they are lawyers, they are accountants, they are elected officials, they are executives of high-tech companies and pharmaceutical companies, they are military officers, government contractors, professors, scientists, potentially hundreds of individuals who took the services of these sex workers. And this is a problem clearly beyond just the Epstein case, where people in power use their power to engage in despicable, disgusting, inhumane behavior and repeatedly get away with it because they think that they're above the law. And in some cases, unfortunately, in our system, they are above the law. And this brothel case also gets back to this idea of potential blackmail. When you have individuals who are politicians or elected officials or individuals who otherwise have their finger on the lever of power, It's a possibility of blackmail and extortion when they get themselves involved in these immoral behaviors. It's the possibility that elected officials could be selling out the American people for personal protection because someone is holding something over their head. So there's a national security element to this as well that doesn't really get talked about enough.
Yeah, that little black book that Maxwell had, if you're the DA's office, certainly this is evidence that would lead to further investigation at the very least, if not more trials. It's insane to me how they think that now that Jeffrey Epstein is gone and Maxwell is in prison for 20 years, that their work is somehow done. It absolutely can't be done. And it seems that that's the way forward for the DA's office. And so without Blackburn subpoenaing this information, I don't know if we could see further legal action. I think it would be the case that these powerful people are above the law. And I think it's disgusting what they were up to. But I think you make a good point that it's more than just the acts themselves. It's the fact that this becomes a part of the lifestyle for the elites in the United States, that they can leverage this for political and financial favors, that they can use this blackmail to get more things done, to get more power, influence, and money in our society. And the American people just have a right to have access to that information, regardless of if the little black book, the flight logs that Maxwell kept are confirmed or not. I think the public just has a right to see that evidence. There are so many court cases where evidence becomes public that the public has no business in knowing. But when you're someone with a lot of resources like Maxwell was, and you can afford really good attorneys, certain things don't come out and are not known by the public. And that's really unfair. And so subpoenaing this information is really important, but we also need full investigation of it. And we need those people to be brought to justice, because so many times we have it become central in a campaign, especially on the right these days, where we talk a lot about human trafficking and how it's a huge problem. And I think the American public cares about it a lot more than ultimately people who are serving in public office end up caring about it, and our judicial system cares about it. And I think you raise a good point that a reason for this could be that the very people that are guilty are the ones making decisions on that front, especially when you consider the clientele of that brothel.
Right, and let's not forget as well, JP Morgan settled for almost $300 million with the women who claim that Jeffrey Epstein abused them because of their involvement in the finances of Epstein as well. I also always think about, whenever we talk about this case, what Madison Cawthorn said when he was serving in Congress. He said that he was invited to an orgy and that it wasn't uncommon for politicians in Washington to be involved in these weird, depraved sex and drug parties. And everyone made fun of him. The Republicans basically pushed him out of the party and ensured that he wouldn't win re-election. And when he first said this, I thought about the Epstein story. I thought about even some of the depraved things I've seen in Washington, which don't rise to this level or even close, but still, I found myself horrified by what some of the people in this town do. And I just couldn't believe that people were so hard on him and so dismissive of what he was saying. To me, it seemed obvious that something like that would happen among high-level politicians. And the idea that he was pushed out of the party because of saying that, I think, lends more credence to the idea that it was probably true. We're going to have to leave it there. We're rising after this.